Awesome. Thanks, Shane. So we'll jump right in and get started. We'll take you kind of through agenda. To get through my presentations, a lot of people need beer, so we're definitely going to start out with that. We'll talk a little bit about the co-managed environment, come back for beer number 2, talk a little bit of some of the tools and the experience that you can have in the co-managed world, and then we'll finish up with beers 3 and 4. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Chris.
All right, cool. Hey, everyone. Thanks for having me on. My name is Chris Quinn. I'm the proprietor of the Beer Temple in Chicago, Illinois. And yeah, thanks to Heartland for having me come in and drink some beers with you guys. So hopefully that's okay. Let me just quickly go through the beers and make sure that we all have the right beers. And I have the right beers. So I'm going to start out with the Bell's Lager of the Lakes. That's where maybe you can see it. Yeah, you can see it better there. Okay. Lager of the Lakes. Then I'm going to jump to Apex Predator, this guy, and then Charlatan from Maplewood, this kind of dual-colored can, and finally the colorful can, Jungle Boogie. So hopefully those are all the same beers that you guys have. If not, give me a shout, and I'll make sure I have the right beers. But with that said, let's open up a beer. If you have a glass, pour it into the glass. If not, that's okay too. And I think we should, let me fill it up. We should probably fill it up all the way. And we'll do a little virtual cheers. I can't see you guys, but no cheating. At least hold up the can. And we'll do a little cheers. So cheers to you guys.
We got
zombie dust. The bang.
Yeah,
I thought that's why I asked. I had it right here. Okay. Perfect. Thank you. All right. Well, I've got the zombie dust. Cool. I had it sitting right here, chilled and ready to go just in case. So thank you, Harleen and Nick. I appreciate that. Either way, we're going to start with the Lager of the Lakes. Okay. So the whole idea behind the tasting, you can see it's pretty Midwest-centric, being from Chicago. Well, being in Chicago, I'm from Philadelphia, but I'm a bit of a homer, so I wanted to keep it local to me. There's great beers all over the country, but I wanted to celebrate a little bit of the Midwest, and it's starting to become a little bit warmer now. So these beers are beers that, well, we drink kind of seasonally, I think. And I found that I just naturally start drinking bigger, heartier beers in the winter. And really lighter beer, sometimes even maybe a little tart or maybe some fruit in them in the summer. But in the spring, it's kind of that like transition time. And these are, I think, beers that are great all year round, but I found myself kind of reaching for more. I'm starting with the Lager of the Lakes, this guy. First, because, well, for a couple of reasons. One, it's a Pilsner, and light. I'm calling like that whole family of light lagers. Light meaning light in color. Well, that looks orange because there's a fox right there. But there you go. That color beer. When you think of beer, like what beer looks like, I like to start there because that constitutes over 99% of all the beer brewed on the planet. Is this style of beer? It's this is a Pilsner. Technically, some of the big guys aren't technically Pilsners, even if they may call themselves Pilsners, but it's all in the same family. They're all light lagers. There's 2 types of beer at the very highest level. There's ales and there's lagers. All beers are one or the other, and it depends on what type of yeast is used. There's ale yeast and there's lager yeast. We're going to drink one lager, and the rest are all going to be ales, okay? And I wanted to start with something that everyone's probably had before. So a light lager, what you're going to get, I mean, there's multiple reasons, only one of which is marketing, that this type of beer has dominated the world. But there's other reasons too. It's so flexible. You can, it kind of fits itself into any situation. It's light, it's easy to drink. But in a version like this, it's also got some decent flavor to it as well. This isn't a beer that you need to sit and hem and haw over. It's a beer that's meant to be drank. Speaking of which, and as you're drinking it, what I want you to do for all these beers is just start, not all the time, but for this event, this class, this tasting, whatever you want to call it, start to think about the flavors and the aromas that you're getting. Might not be the easiest for this beer. It's a pretty mild beer. The whole point of a lager is to kind of, well, let me take a step back quickly. There's 4 main ingredients in beer, okay? You can put a whole bunch of stuff into beer, but there's 4 main ones, okay? If anyone wants to type any of the 4 main ingredients in beer, you'll get brownie points, and I don't know what those will end up being, but they're worth a lot. Brownie points have a high value, and it's only going up from here, from what I hear. But what do you guys know? Hops, water, absolutely. That's 2 of them. 2 of the 4. Let's see. I'll give you guys another 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2. Yes. 1. Boom, boom. All right. Got it. Got it. You guys nailed it. Okay. The 4 are water, hops, yeast, and grain. Barley, exactly as Brian said, being the primary grain used in beer. It's actually a grain that was domesticated for use in beer. That is why that grain exists. It was domesticated around the same time wheat was domesticated. So that, to give you an idea of how long people have been drinking beer, as long as they've been baking bread, pretty much. It's kind of like liquid bread. And with a lager, the way this works, the beer works, is yeast is what makes the alcohol. Every drop of alcohol you've ever drank comes from yeast. It eats sugar and it makes alcohol. That's what it does. That's what yeast does. The grain provides the sugar in the form of carbohydrates, you know, complex sugars, starches, stuff like that. The water is where it all happens. And the hops provide kind of the spicing and the balance to the inherent sweetness from the sugar, from the grain. In a lager, what they're really trying to get it down to is just the water, the grain, and the hops. They don't want that yeast flavoring things at all. So that's the whole point of lager. So that's what you're really going to be looking for. Don't worry about the water too much for this one. That's beer 102. This is beer 101 here. But see if you can get something with a beer this light, very lightly bready, probably more crackery, maybe like a saltine minus the salt, like a water cracker, but maybe even a little breadier than that. And if you get any herbal or crisp qualities to it, that's the hops. But really what it comes down to is a nice balance of those two in a very light form and something that's super easy drinking and a good kind of platform for us to jump off from in the future beers that we're going to be tasting. So why don't you guys drink this? And I think we're going to be hearing a little bit more as far as a presentation from Heartland, and then I'll come back and we'll drink some more, if that's okay.
Awesome. Great. Let's jump right in and get rolling here. So with this, you know, I was super excited for this presentation for a number of different reasons. First off, I'm pretty passionate about this topic of hybrid IT. And number 2, I'm a huge beer drinker, love to try some of the different beers. I was unfortunately really disappointed though, because I was looking forward to these 4 beers that Chris was going to send up to us. And my marketing guy forgot to send them to me. So we have an opening now. So if you know of any good marketing people that can ship beer to the presenter, they definitely have a leg up. And, you know, it is what it is. It's all good, Jamie. Love you, bud. So let's get in and we'll talk a little bit about, you know, the hybrid IT model, right? So for years, there's been this historical dilemma, right? Do I buy? Do I build? Do I lease? Do I own? Do I insource everything or do I outsource everything? And really what we found over the last couple of years is the hybrid model is really kind of the best way that we see, where you have a mixture of both internal IT as well as vendors that can help support that model. And when we work with our clients, you know, across you know, the half a dozen states that we cover, that model, that hybrid infrastructure that we design and that we work with you on really varies a lot based on what your IT maturity level is. So we've kind of coined this phrase IT operational maturity level. And based on where you're at within that maturity level, there's different tools and different processes that you're trying to kind of adapt to. So I'm going to start off by taking you through this operational maturity model. You know, level 1's the chaotic maturity model. Typically, you're fighting fires. There's not a lot of documentation. the workload is very unpredictable. The network's very unstable. A lot of times there's not a lot of IT people involved in those, typically a smaller business. And you're basically adjusting your workload based on user call notifications. The tools you typically have available to you are emails and spreadsheets, but I was on a call, no lie on this, about 4 weeks ago with an IT director for a small school district. And she said she organized her life by Post-it notes. And the reason she was kind of getting us involved was kind of help triage that workload and bring a ticketing system in. So level 2 in the IT operational maturity level is really around being more reactive. So now that we have a process in place to really manage those those problems that come across, those tickets, issues, example, where you take them from start to finish, you start to be able to communicate with users and track what's going on. A lot of time in this reactive model, you may start to implement some monitoring solutions for you. You may not have it fully integrated into your policies, but it may be sending you an email when something breaks or calling out to you if something breaks. But you're starting to get to the point where you're delivering a little bit better reactive support for your users. Typically in these models, you start to implement some sort of ticketing system. You may have a monitoring platform, and you may start to do some basic asset tracking a lot of times with a spreadsheet. So you know when PCs and switches and stuff come into to your business, you can track the age of them, start to build out a life cycle for it. As you move up into level 3, you start to be more proactive with things. You start to create thresholds and alerts, not just up and down monitoring. You start to look to predict problems that are arising in your network. So looking at things like performance to understand when you need to add RAM or CPU. You start to analyze trends. And now you may start to even look at more of an asset management program, create a life cycle where, say, it's a 3-year rolling life cycle, which is what we use at Heartland for most of our internal IT, where we're constantly cycling that out. We know how we're going to start to budget for that. In the proactive level 3, you're also starting to be more proactive when it comes to keeping your things up to date, right? So you may implement a remote monitoring and management tool where you can take over remote control to be able to drive users. You can push out, automate, patching for those devices, push out software to those devices. You may bring in a true IT asset management platform where you know exactly who has the asset, what all they have, what tickets are associated with it, and be able to see specific issues and start to identify issues to specific devices as well as to specific users. A lot of times in level 3, you'll start to look at a true documentation platform, which we'll go into that in a little more detail, what I mean by a structured documentation platform. And you're also starting to look more at security. Maybe you have an MDR platform, or maybe you're starting to look at, a SIM or managed SOC type solution as well. As you move into level 4, it's really about delivering service for your end users. So you may be providing some level of service level to them, guaranteeing availability. You're starting to truly understand your costs, not only from an equipment perspective, but also from an employee perspective. You start to integrate your processes into it from a hiring perspective, from a technology escalation perspective. And you start to look at capacity management. You may have some reporting that's telling you how busy your engineers are on site, how many tickets they're processing. You start to take some business intelligence. For us here at Heartland, we're big into Power BI, both from an internal use perspective as well as assisting our customers. And so some of the things I track with my particular teams are how many tickets are they doing in a day? What's the time to respond to a ticket? What's the time to close a ticket? How many hours are they spent actively helping people? And you can start to predict when you're going to need that headcount prior to you getting there. A lot of times, often at level 4, you're also integrating customer satisfaction as well, sending out surveys to your users, letting you know how your team is doing. So now you can use those CSAT surveys for reviews of your employees and help coach them to be better in certain areas. And then the last level in IT operational maturity is really level 5, and it's the value level. This is where IT becomes a strategic business partner for your particular company. IT is at the table in a lot of decision making, in acquisitions, in growth strategy, where you start to really bring solutions to them to drive the business process. And this is where we want to kind of take all of our clients up through. Most of the clients we work with, they're all over the board. Some are at level 1, some are at level 5, and then they look to us to try to fill the gaps and some of the gaps that they have in there, right? So we'll switch gears a little bit and talk a little bit about the benefits of insourcing versus outsourcing and where the pros and cons are. when we start to talk about building your own internal staff for your organization, there are some advantages to doing that. Probably first and foremost is vertical experience. They start to understand your organization. Even if they haven't come from your organization, they really start to get a good feel if you're in manufacturing or if you're specific to other customer verticals. They start to understand that. They also know the people, and they have a cultural understanding who can wait a little bit longer, who's kind of maybe the problem children, so to speak, the noisiest voices within the room, to be able to address them, first and take that on. The other pro is that there's on-site availability, right? If you have an issue within IT, they know where to go and track someone down to be able to get help. And because they're an employee, they're very much invested in your business. Some of the cons of having internal IT staff is a lot of times, especially when you're a smaller organization, you have to be an IT generalist. You have to be good at a lot of different things, which doesn't allow you the time or the sheer mental capacity to be an expert at every single thing that you touch. So you become a little bit more shallow. As I was prepping for this presentation, I started to research, average number of headcount per IT employee. And it's kind of all over the board depending on the size, but it really stems between 50 and 75 users per IT support person. And when you're covering that much ground, it's hard to be super deep in a specific application or very security focused until you get to be larger organizations with much more headcount to be specialized. Oftentimes in the smaller businesses especially, there's a lack of tools, whether it be ticketing or RMM or documentation. It's hard to sell management on a lot of those benefits. And those tools can take a lot of time to be able to maintain and tune alerts. There's a lot of companies that we talk to where they may have a monitoring platform in place. And what they've done is they've taken those alerts that come in an email and they basically send them to folders, essentially ignoring a lot of them. And so they haven't taken the time to really tune those alerts, make sure that they're only getting alerted on stuff they have to react to and be proactive on. The other hard part with having everything internal is to balance your project work with your service work. It seems in a lot of cases, the people that we work with, they're stuck keeping the lights on, and it doesn't give them time to focus on the projects, which in some cases is okay. That's where you outsource to us to kind of come in and help with the project. But also, we want you to be strategic in what you're doing there. So to be able to be involved in having direction within those projects and maybe offloading some of the service so that you can be strategic with the business, at level 5 of that OML model to deliver that business value. The other piece of it is because a lot of times it's much more of a generalist, and you install something and it kind of sits there for 4 or 5 years in your life cycle. Sometimes internal IT isn't always up to date on the latest trends that are coming out, new technologies, whether it be in the security space or hyperconvergence or other components that are more cutting edge, as to what you'll see with some of the vendors out there. And then the last piece is turnover, especially for smaller IT staff. Turnover can really wreak a lot of havoc. A lot of times we get called in if somebody leaves a company that's in IT, or maybe they want to get rid of somebody who's in IT. It absolutely amazes me how often ownership within those organizations really doesn't understand what they have. They don't have access to passwords. They don't know kind of what's happening there. And so without having at least an IT partner that's somewhat familiar with your environment, that turnover can be a little bit more strenuous. When we look to outsource IT, some of the advantages are really around availability, especially for the small shops out there. We provide 24/7 coverage. So if you need to go on vacation or you want to have a weekend off and not be the guy on call, it allows you to have other people kind of having your back. The technical expertise in depth, right? Because we're more in that contracting business, our engineers are constantly installing the technology over and over and over at other companies just like yours. They become very much experts in the delivery of that. They understand the different methodologies. They've dealt with the problems that have arisen at other clients, so it helps streamline that experience for you. Oftentimes, they're very up to date on the new technology. We have vendors knocking on the door every single day of the week wanting to sell us the latest and greatest. And we try to focus on our core partners. Most major technologies, we have 2 different partners, and we stay up to date with all of the new stuff that's kind of coming there, so we can kind of bring that thought leadership to you, especially in the security space. So we're starting to see ransomware, especially in the new COVID world, become more and more prevalent with ransomware and other components. There's a lot to learn just in the security space. We have a whole practice with 5 different focus areas just in security alone. Also in outsourcing IT, we can bring process and tools to the table. So a triage process to get from problem to resolution, and all the tools to help support you in that journey from problem to resolution. And then of course there's scale, right? If you have an acquisition, you open a new office, we can bring scale and we can bring geographic dispersity as well to that. And really what it is when it comes to outsourcing is we want to be able to reduce your distractions so you can really focus on getting to OML5 and driving the business. There are some cons as well to outsourcing at times. Sometimes availability is an issue. So I have it as both an advantage and a disadvantage. Availability can be 24/7. It could be availability of specific resources. But when you have someone on site, you can still always kind of go to their office door and get that help at a moment's notice, where sometimes with a vendor, it may take a little bit longer to get the specific resource you have. When we work with clients where they don't have IT staff, sometimes they feel maybe a little bit of a loss of control when they outsource everything to us. We try to keep them up to speed with what's going on there, but sometimes that can be kind of a perceived disadvantage. And then the last disadvantage is we aren't always super familiar with the nature of your business. There are certain verticals where we do extremely well, but just having someone that's living there every day can have them be a little bit more familiar. If we spin this a little bit to the Heartland world, the big advantage we bring is really our technical depth and technical expertise. There's a lot of different things that you see on the slide that we cover. When I talk to clients, basically say if it runs on Blue Cable, we pretty much have a solution or a partner that offers that. All of these different offerings and business units within Heartland are all Heartland staff. So whether it be cabling or AV or collaboration or networking or cloud or managed services or DR, we have all of those expertise in-house. And a lot of our competitors out there will make those same claims, but it's like a guy that's here or there. The big thing we bring to the table is really our support at scale. So with Heartland, we have over 225 engineers that support our clients every day. We have over 50 solutions consultants there that are help you along your technology journey. And then we have our customer experience reps that kind of bridge the gap between sales and service to make sure that we're keeping you up with renewals or making sure the engineers are getting scheduled and they need to be scheduled, etc. The other piece of it is just scale. We have people on this call from all over the 6 states that we pretty much cover. We have offices. Our big push is really to have local resources within those offices. When you start talking managed services, we've seen a lot of people in the competitive space make acquisitions outside of market and then try to centralize every single thing that they do. We're really big about having those resources where we need them in front of our customers so that they can be the feet on the street to be there to be able to help and deploy new technology. Tons of achievements. There's a lot here. Some national awards, growth awards. In most major technologies. I'm not going to really spend too much time on that. And then there are certain vertical environments where we do very well. If you look at the last slide, we do a lot in the SLED space, the state, the local, and education. So government, education. We do a ton in SMB, and then a few other verticals as well. Last but not least is we definitely have a pulse on the vendor landscape. I think we have over 150 different vendors that we work with. Here's some of our core vendors. We're very much in tune with the technology they offer from the very low end to the very high end. We stay up to date on a lot of the cutting edge technologies that are there. So then when we come in to bring solutions to you, we're really able to kind of take a independent approach from maybe a couple of different vendors to give you a best of breed solution within your environment. So really what we look at it with the hybrid IT model, it's really around bringing your company and our company together to leverage the best of both worlds. Giving the cultural knowledge and the experience that you have and availability and relationships and pairing that with our speed, our process, our scale, our security, and our experience allows you to kind of keep that strategic focus for your business to help take your business to the next level, allows you the ability to execute and deliver projects, on time and in budget. It allows you to take and optimize your workflows, which we'll talk a lot about in the second part of this, of really what the process looks like and how we integrate our tools with your staff and our staff to really have a cohesive workflow to deliver to your end users. And at the end of the day, it's really around delivering business efficiency and satisfy your internal customers, which are your employees. So seeing all these beers and cheers, I think it's probably now is a good time to bring Chris back in to introduce us to beer number 2.
Awesome. Thank you. Cool. Well, next beer I have is a Chicago beer, Apex Predator from Offcolor Brewing. And I'm just going to go ahead and open it. Now, let me say, the beers are yours now. You can open them in any order you want. If you open a beer until you're done with the last one, I totally understand. If you know, I cheat, so I have a little dump bucket. I'll admit it. So don't feel though that you need to finish the beer before you open up this one. So don't worry about that at all. I'm going to get going pouring this one. So Offcolor. I was talking a little bit about lager yeast and ale yeast and stuff like that. And I was trying to set this beer up a little bit. I was talking about how in lagers, the whole idea was to kind of suppress the yeast character. Well, the Belgian model is to kind of enhance the yeast character and to kind of center the beer around these yeasty flavors. If you're a fan of those kind of yeasty flavors, if you're familiar with what those are, definitely check out Belgian beers. But Belgian beers, or Belgian style beer, I should really say. Anytime you see Belgian style on a beer, it means that they're using Belgian yeast, really. And you're going to expect these yeasty flavors. These yeasty flavors tend to be, they can be fruity or spicy. And spicy tends to be like the spiciness that you would get from like spices in your spice cabinet. Not like heat, obviously, you know. But this brewery in Chicago, Offcolor, that's kind of, they've taken that very much to heart, that you can focus not just a beer, but all your beers around yeast. And that's exactly what they've done. They're very proud in the age of IPAs and hops to not make an IPA. But this is their answer to people who always ask them to make an IPA. They say, you know, hops are awesome, but there's a ton of people who know how to use them really well. We're going to try a different tack. And what happens is, yes, there is definitely a scary lion on the label. He's not that scary though, right? I mean, he looks kind of friendly, I guess, as friendly as lions can be. But the whole thing with this beer is they're trying to get some of these fruity flavors that you often find in hops, but they're trying to get it from the yeast and give you, it's not supposed to taste like an IPA, but kind of scratch that same itch. So when you're pouring this beer, again, well, I don't think I mentioned this before, the color of the beer comes from the grain, and especially specifically how much they've toasted it. Just like when you put something in a toaster, you turn the dial, the more you turn the dial, the darker the bread gets until eventually it's blackened and charred. And I was just imagining in my mind, I paused because I was thinking, actually, that happens at like 6 on mine. But, you know, it's supposed to be 10, I would think. But anyway, same thing with grain. As they toast it, it gets darker. So you can tell when a beer is this light, since the color comes from the grain, it's going to have a light kind of grain toasted character, bready. Think of white bread or something like that, white crackers. But take a sniff and see if you can pick up anything that's maybe a little spicy or a little fruity. They put a ton of information on the can here too, which is pretty cool. And I don't think, yeah, they don't. Awesome. So to me, it almost has like a coriander note to it. And there's a ton of coriander in a ton of Belgian beers put coriander in them, but there isn't any in here. That's because the reason they put coriander in these beers is because that is what naturally these Belgian yeast create, and they want to kind of complement it. But you don't necessarily even need to add it. There's also fruitiness in this beer. A lot of times in this beer, I get like a mild, like juicy fruit bubblegum type thing. Juicy fruit bubblegum is actually flavored with yeast extract. It's not actually fruit. Yeast can make a ton of really, really fruity flavors. If anyone's had a German wheat beer that tastes like there's banana in it, same thing. Artificial banana is a yeast-derived flavor as well. So Yeah, nice springtime beer. This one's a little bit stronger. Almost has a, it's not even tart, but it has like a leanness to it at the end. Maybe a slight kind of lemony character. Light, fruity, easy drinking. Doesn't have that bite that some people don't like, that hops can also often give. And it's just a really kind of easy sipper, despite having a lion that scares Nick on the label. But just turn it the other way and don't look at it. Don't look at you know, just pour it with your right hand so it faces out, and then you don't have to look at them. So that is the Apex Predator. I would say this is kind of the yeasty Belgian inspired beer of the group, and the one that I'm going to be sipping on for the next part of the presentation from Jason, unless there's any questions for me, or I can also answer them in the chat while Jason's talking. So I'm cool either way. I think it's you, Jason.
All right, awesome. So let's shift gears here a little bit. And so when we talk about co-managed IT, really when we talk co-managed, it can mean different things to different customers. We have customers that are looking for our support on the very low end stuff, the easy stuff, the help desk, the repetitive things, so that they can kind of scale up and focus on their core business. Especially in the small and medium business, you know, a lot of times there may not be a dedicated IT person there. They're focused on finance or other components. They want us to kind of take the noise off of their plate. Other times you have IT staff that are there. They're trying to take the noise off their plate so they can focus on their projects, so they can focus on delivering business value. We also have the other end of that spectrum too, where you have staff that are capable of taking the very easy things, and you need us to come in with the heavy lifting, right? To do the projects, to do the major deployments, to handle the major problems and upgrades. We can handle both ends of that spectrum. When we talk about getting into the hybrid IT model, we've done those kinds of components for years. What we're starting to see more of when I say hybrid IT is where we're bringing the teams closer together so that we're working in the same processes. We can be able to take the same tool sets. So when we developed our managed services program, a big part of what I wanted to do was be able to take all of the tools and the processes that we do and share that with our clients. Because those tools and those processes are really what our special sauce are in delivering a good experience to our end users. So there's a number of different tools we'll talk about here, and we'll take you through each one and a little bit of how this works in our co-management model. Happy to kind of get in with you guys offline and do a deeper demo of how we can build this into your world. But we'll kind of take and talk through this a little bit. So the biggest piece of that pie is really our ticketing system. And so we have the ticketing system where we can identify exactly who the user is. We can see the statuses. We can identify types and subtypes so that we can start to report on it and see trends. So maybe Jim Smith constantly is requesting support for a Word training issue. Maybe we just get Jim some training, right? Or maybe Jim's PC is constantly having problems. We want to be able to associate those tickets to both the user and to the device that's having that issue. We also want to understand the urgency, right? So when engineers are working through these tickets, if it's something that's affecting more users, we want to be able to assign a different priority, be able to provide service levels that go and coincide with that priority to really deliver that expectations to the user. For us, we also integrate it with our customer satisfaction tools. So every single ticket that goes out through our managed services team includes a survey that says, hey, how did we do? You click on a smiley face. You can put a comment back that'll actually go back inside to the ticketing system. So then when we look to run reports against it, we know how we're doing. And we have a lot of customers where they're living in our ticketing system and they're doing tickets for their users, and they're even using that same methodology to survey their own employees and see how they're performing. You need to be able to assign resources to it so you know who's working on it, schedule it if you want from right within the tool. The big pieces of it too is communication back and forth. So making sure your users know what's happening. Are you working on it? Has the ticket been assigned? And as you communicate back and forth, whether that communication is via email or on the phone, making sure you're putting notes in the ticket. So if somebody else tends to help that end user at a future date, they can go back and see what the issues were, be able to maybe more quickly get to a resolution. Or if there's an issue that arises, you have the whole history of what happened to know kind of what's going on with that. And then last but not least is to be able to tie it to the asset. So a big piece of the tool set that we use is bringing the asset right into it. So I can see exactly which laptop this is on. If I click on the little green gear icon, it'll take me into our backend RMM tool. If I click on the little red icon, it'll take me right into the device, and I can immediately start working on it right from the ticket within a couple of seconds. The second layer of kind of our tool set is really our remote monitoring and management platform. So this tool is basically an agent we put on all of our servers and desktops that allow us to see every single asset that is in their PC or server. And so if I would have clicked on the green gear icon, what it would have done is it would have popped up information about that asset, right? So I could see, oh, it's an HP machine. Here's the serial number, the BIOS info. Maybe we're running some scripts in the background against it. Like one of the scripts we run for a lot of our clients is capturing the BitLocker keys. So in the event that they get locked out, if their drives are encrypted, that we can get them into it. But it also allows us to do things like be able to push out patches on a scheduled basis. This particular machine isn't part of a patch schedule, so there's no compliance piece here. Or even get in and see services. So I can click on the service window. It'll show me all the services that are running. Maybe it was just a service that was stopped that happened to cause the issue. I can restart the service without ever touching the person's machine, right? So I don't have to remote interrupt them. I might be able to fix it all behind the scenes without them knowing. Also allows us to do things like push software out to them silently, a lot of different utility tools. But there is a lot of times where I need to see kind of what's happening. And so from this tool, I could click on the control icon at the top and it'll pop me right into that machine where now I can see the user's desktop. They have multiple screens. I can zoom in on their screens. I can have a chat with them. I can copy a file over to their machine. Maybe they need a driver update. I can draw on the screen to kind of train them. I can also capture screenshots or video. So maybe there's a certain key sequence that causes the issue, and I need to escalate to your line of business software application vendor. Maybe you're running a legal app, and those certain things are causing the problem. We want to send that off to them. We can do that all with these tools. This has been instrumental over the last 15 months of what we've been dealing with here is being able to really remotely support those users from anywhere. So your users can be anywhere and you can be anywhere, and utilizing this technology, you can take control of them without them being on the network, without you being kind of in the office. So fantastic tools for your remote support staff. Shifting gears a little bit, the next layer of it is really taking monitoring to the next level. So the RMM platform that I just showed you is great for Windows workstations, Mac, Linux, et cetera, to be able to kind of do the troubleshooting, patching, monitoring the performance of that particular VM. But sometimes you want to look at other components, right? Switches, routers, firewalls, server hosts, vCenter, SQL applications, cloud, you name it. We want to be able to kind of track what's going on there to, number one, be able to alert of issues that are happening there, but also be able to troubleshoot problems, right? You always get, hey, we're dealing with slow internet. Well, where do you go to kind of see, is there really some certain things that are slow? Are there certain applications that are driving that or causing that problem? Digging in and looking at exactly what the traffic is that's causing it, or maybe somebody's streaming some radio or whatever it may be. You can kind of curtail some of those pieces, right? So the monitoring tools will give you a couple of different things. Some are some fancy looking dashboards where you can drill in to see exactly what the traffic is. The other piece that's really nice with the monitoring tools, especially when you get to the networking devices, is making sure you understand the changes that are taking place. So with our core monitoring platform, we'll monitor all of the changes for your switches or your firewalls, making sure we have all the recent configuration changes that were there. So if a piece of equipment fails, we always have a backup copy of the database that's there. Or maybe somebody was in there making a change last week and now is on vacation this week and you're having some issues and you want to see what those changes were that they made. I can pull up a differential view, which is kind of what I have up here. So you can see, oh, these were the changes that were made from, last year to this year, whatever that may be. And last but not least is being able to logically map out connectivity, like what device is connected to what device and how we can start to show some different maps that are available as well. Another key tool in your arsenal is really around structured IT documentation. We've seen documentation all over the boards from non-existent to only living on individuals' computers, being in the text files with passwords and text files not encrypted and all kinds of different security issues with it. One of the big things you can do to really stay more organized is look at a structured documentation platform. And when I say structured documentation, there's things like SharePoint out there or OneNote where it's very unstructured. You create a page, you put in there whatever you want, and you go. Structured documentation is really around where you take and for us, we've very clearly defined assets, applications, agreements, networks, and we want specific things put into it. So IP addresses, what IPs are connected to what switches, what ports are connected to where. So you could literally look at the documentation without being on site and really track and map out what the network looks like. This switch is connected to this router, which is connected to this firewall, which connects out to the internet, right? And then also it's a great place to have secure, stored password management so that you can restrict who has access to certain passwords, as well as see who's viewed passwords, right? So if you have an employee leave the company and you want to go in and change the passwords, you can see everything that they may have touched, over a certain period of time to go in and kind of take that over. The other nice thing with the structured documentation plan is you can link assets together. So I can go in and create a relationship that this particular switch and server are located in this IDF on this floor of this building for your company, right? So I can create custom viewpoints that says, show me every device that's in this particular room, right? Or vice versa, where is this device located? You can look and see where it's at physically. So if you have to go swap it out, you kind of have that particular data. The other pieces that we'll put into the structured documentation program are things like expirations for domain names or SSL certificates, knowledge-based documents. So maybe there's some best practice documents that you use over and over to set up a new PC in your network. All of the steps that you have to do, you can create these knowledge-based articles that allow you a single source of truth where you're always going here to find that information. That kind of leads into the next phase of it is really around asset management and lifecycle management. So being able to take the devices that you have, know who physically has them and who owns them, have asset tags associated to them, understand serial numbers, understand software versions, right? So, maybe you have a certain virus or something that comes out that's only pertinent to certain versions in the OS. You want to be able to run a report of everybody that has that OS version, right? The other piece of it is being able to identify and build a lifecycle management. So what we do in our asset management platform is we actually integrate it with a warranty platform where it'll take and look at all the devices in the asset management platform, do a lookup to all of the core vendors that are out there, the main vendors, the HPs, the Dells, the Ciscos of the world, and it'll tell me when is this device expiring from its warranty. And then it'll allow you to kind of build your life cycle out as to, okay, this is what we're going to replace this year, next year, the year after. And also it'll show you things that slip through the cracks. So we've seen a number of situations where when we provide this report out to our customer, like, holy cow, I still have a Windows 7 box in my environment. I forgot that we had that because it's running some obscure sign that's in the back room or, a heating and cooling system or whatever it may be. It allows you kind of stay on top of those types of things as well. Last and certainly not least, when it comes to rounding out the portfolio is really around reporting and CSAT. So like I said, for us, we're sending out CSATs with every ticket that we close. You click on the little smiley face, it allows them to leave a comment. It's done a lot for our team. Not only does it give me a performance indicator of how the team is working, it also has improved their morale. Like the comments that we see they're hilarious sometimes, and it really makes the employees feel like the job that they're doing is worthwhile. I had one the other day that caught my eye. We have kind of a joker that's on our help desk, and the customer comment back was, I had so much fun talking to Jeffrey that I'm going to call back even when there's not a problem, right? So just getting those little things, like it really improves the morale for your staff as well. And then last but not least, taking all of these different tools that you have and being able to put it into a performance dashboard that allows you to be able to track what's going on. How many tickets are open? How many are closed? What was the time horizon? Who did what? What was the CSAT ratings of the different things that came in? What was our time to answer, our time to respond? These are all things that allow you to kind of adjust staffing, know when you need to add someone if your times are getting out of whack, see who your top performers are for a given week, month, year, whatever that may be, to be able to better predict that performance and get out ahead of any other support resources that you may need. So with that, that's a lot of talking. Let's pass it back over to Chris for beers number 3 and 4.
All right, cool. So I'll use my dump bucket here. All right, beers 3 and 4. All right, so these are going to be the 2 kind of hoppy beers. We're going to start with the Zombie Dust, and then we'll go to the Jungle Boogie last. So we'll start with the Zombie Dust, Munster, Indiana's 3 Floyds Brewing. So I'd mentioned the ingredients, the kind of the core ingredients being water, yeast, or you guys actually mentioned it, water, yeast, grain, and hops. And I said hops are kind of the spice of beer. So really the way this works is, inherently during the brewing process, the sugars, the complex sugars in the grains are broken down and they become literally sweet. If you taste beer right before it's, before it's fermented, it's quite sweet. It's sweeter than you would think like a porridge would be, which is basically, they take the grain and they add water to it and then they strain it out. And that sugar is mostly eaten up by the yeast, but some is left, okay? And they want a way to kind of dry the beers out. And that's where hops come in. They do kind of 2 things. One, they bitter the beer, and bitterness is a direct counteracting element to the sweetness on your palate. They counteract each other. So if you have something that's sweet and you add bitterness to it, it tastes less sweet. If you have something that's bitter and you add sugar to it, it tastes less bitter. The other thing is hops have these oils in them that are very flavorful. And if you steep hops at a warm temperature, those oils will be released into the beer and they'll flavor it. Those oils tend to be fruity and also kind of, I call it green. So it can be like grassy, herbal, piney, dank. Some people say anything kind of green related. And on the fruity side, citrus is kind of the big one, but it can get, beyond that too, maybe even into a little bit like peachy or like tropical, essentially. So what we have here is both types of hop elements in one beer. This pale ale uses, and all pale ales are kind of hop forward beers. Pale ales being kind of the baby version, or the entry-level version of the IPA. Kind of goes pale ale, IPA, double IPA is kind of the general way it goes. They're all going to be hoppy, and they're going to kind of step up in alcohol as you go up. But the one thing I want to talk about with the hops here, they use this hop that's called Citra, which has a citrusy flavor. So see if you can pick that up on the aroma or when you taste it. And when you taste it, if you haven't tasted it yet, hold off for just a moment, because I want you to try to notice something, okay? The thing about bitterness is that you do not taste it as easily as you taste sweetness. We've evolved to taste sweet things very, very quickly. Bitterness takes our brain a little bit longer to figure out what it is that's on our tongue, okay? So that means if you have something that is sweet and bitter, you don't taste them at the same exact time. If you have them in relatively equal amounts, if it's hardly any sweetness and all bitter, that won't be the case. But if they're relatively equal, you don't taste them at the same time. You taste the sweetness, and then the sweetness will drop out and the bitterness comes in. Now, this is a very bitter beer, so it'll happen very quickly. But see if you can notice when you first taste it, especially for the first time, but even subsequent times, when you first taste it, if you get some of that sweetness right in line with some of those fruity flavors from the hops. And then the way I usually taste it in this beer is you get some of that, then you get that carbonation, and then taste what's in your mouth after that. So let's see. Yeah. And then the bitterness comes. So now, taste what's going on in your mouth now. Where's that sweetness? It's gone. The beer hasn't literally become less sweet. It hasn't literally become more bitter. It's just how we perceive things. And it's what brewers do. They're very aware of this. And it's what they do to kind of create beers in this fashion, to make beers more drinkable. Because what do you do when your mouth is dry? You pick something up and you drink it. Now, it happens very quickly in this beer, but it actually has been at play to some degree in all the beers, even beers that aren't considered hoppy. Any beer that dries out over time, and it could take 30 seconds. Next time you have a beer, drink it, and then come back and don't take another sip and wait 30 seconds and then kind of taste the moisture in your mouth and see if it's drier than it was. And that is the bitterness at play. It's kind of the backbone along with the grain of beer. And it's in display in a big time way in this zombie dust, but also those fruity aromas too. And it's important to remember, it doesn't need to have both. Poppy beers don't need to have the flavor and the bitterness. It can have one or the other. So if you don't like bitterness, but you like the flavor of hops, next time you're at a shop, tell them that. They'll pick out a beer that doesn't have the bitterness, but has all that hoppy flavor for you. So it's important to remember, or vice versa. So that's the zombie dust. Nick is keeping us updated on the snacks he will be eating as he opens up that beer. But this beer is really fun. It's kind of a modified version of a pale ale. Okay. So this is from Mars Community Brewing, the south side of Chicago, right by where the Sox play. And they've done something really cool. I think this is one of the coolest beers coming out of Chicago right now. It just says on the can that it's a pale wheat beer with rooibos tea. But that's not really fair because it's a little bit more than that. Really, what it is they add this tea to it, but they have a hop that's very fruity, and then they add this tea that's very fruity. And when you smell it, man, I mean, you would think there was actual fruit in this beer, but there isn't. There's no peaches or whatever you think that it smells like to you in there. It's just an amazing beer. And you also get a little bit of a tannin note on the back end, like you would from like if you ever steeped your tea and you get like your teeth kind of stick to your lips, you get a tiny bit of that from the tea here too, which is a cool complement to the bitterness. And it kind of helps dry the beer out. Really fun beer. Yeah, delicious beer from Mars. One of my absolute favorites. Very unique beer as well. So I know we're short on time, but I wanted to leave a little bit if there's anything else, if you guys had any questions, or if Jason, if there's any final words you wanted to say. I hope I didn't rush too quickly through things, but I wanted to get everything in and not hold people up. So, but there you go.
Yeah, so I guess we can take Q&As. Shane, did you get any questions that came in?
Yeah, I have one here. So for your, pertaining to your presentation, is there an ideal customer that fits your model, the model you presented on?
Yeah, so it's interesting. You would think typically in more of the small business, that would be where a managed service or co-managed service would fit. But we have customers that are kind of all shapes and sizes. We recently added a hospital with about 1,000 users in it down in Iowa. The big thing that they really wanted was process, right? So we brought in and implemented a ticketing system for them. They were very overwhelmed with projects that they had on the board, and they had lost a couple of staff. So we actually integrated our help desk in to be able to take off some of that easy lifting so they could focus on the projects. And then we also assist on the project side. They kind of drove the overall architecture or the delivery of it, and we kind of did the deployment. So that's definitely an interesting one. We had a city government here in Wisconsin that had I think they have 3 or 4 IT guys. They were working with another managed service provider, but they didn't have access to any of the tools, right? So they would outsource their help desk, but then passing the buck back over to the staff was really clunky. So what we did is we pulled them into our tools. We assigned tickets to their staff. We actually front-end it for them. We have other situations where the customer front-ends everything. They do all their own help desk, and then they just change the status to escalate it to our staff, which surfaces it into our views, and we can kind of take it from there. So I would say there's not necessarily a one-size customer that fits within it. It just depends on maybe where you have some gaps. Maybe you're missing some tools. Maybe you're missing some process. Maybe you're missing just some skills or need some additional hands to be able to balance out the peaks and valleys. Either one of those work in our world, right?
Awesome.
I'm not going to drink from my dump bucket, by the way. but I do have to roll, guys. I've actually have another tasting, so it won't be as good as this one, though, I promise. But thank you guys so much.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you, guys.
If there's no other questions, we'll just kind of finish here with a wrap up. So thanks for joining us today. If you're interested in scheduling a deeper discussion, you feel free to reach out to me. I think Shane's going to pop up a little offering here. If you do take an offer, we're offering a $50 Amazon gift card for you to kind of sit through and talk about how Heartland might be able to supplement your team and your tools and help streamline your processes. So thank you much.